The glass door of Wealth Delier's Branch 72 eased open into the dim hush of early morning. It was exactly 5:57 a.m., 3 minutes before the official opening time. Golden threads of dawn spilled across the entrance, casting a long, quiet shadow of the man who stood just inside the frame. A worn-out backpack hung loosely from one shoulder. His uniform, though neatly pressed, still bore the folded creases from being freshly unpackaged, telling its own story of beginning. The man stepped into the cool, fluorescent lighting of the restaurant. His face emerged slowly, revealing a blend of youth and weariness. Mid-30s, perhaps, but his eyes, shielded by thin, wire-rimmed glasses, carried a weight. Not sadness, but a stillness forged from witnessing too much in too little time. There was something ancient in their quiet patience, something that observed more than it spoke. Voice pierced the calm like a slap to still water. "Doors are locked for a reason," snapped a gruff voice from behind the register. The speaker, a middle-aged man hunched over a stack of bills, didn't bother to look up. "We open at 6. The newcomer gave a small nod, his voice composed and calm. "I'm the new hire, Elijah Brooks. The district office asked me to report early for orientation." That finally got a reaction. Chad Riker, for the past 4 years, looked up. At 39, with patchy stubble and receding hair, he tried to overcompensate with too much product. Chad had mastered the art of sizing people up in a heartbeat. His eyes flicked across Elijah. No tattoos, no flashy accessories, no arrogance. Just another nobody trying to survive. Disposable. "Dishwasher, right?" Chad said, slamming the register shut with a loud metallic snap. "Orientation packets on the counter, mops are in the closet, start now." No handshake, no tour, no welcome. Elijah didn't flinch. He walked over, picked up the packet with precise, respectful care, and replied softly, "Thank you for the opportunity, sir." Chad let out a scoffing laugh. "We don't do that, sir, crap here. It's Chad." His eyes lingered a beat too long, watching how Elijah held the papers like they mattered. "You don't talk much, huh?" "Only when it's necessary," Elijah replied, with a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. By 6:30 a.m., the branch had erupted into its usual morning storm, controlled chaos disguised as routine. Melody Carson, 24, with platinum-dyed hair and impossibly long acrylic nails that somehow never interfered with making sandwiches, watched from the corner of her eye as Chad led Elijah toward the mop closet. "That's the new guy," she whispered to Darren Wilson, the former high school football hero, still riding the last fumes of his glory days. "Yeah," Darren muttered back, loud enough not to care who heard. "Another warm body to do the grunt work. Chad said he's got a college degree or something, probably thinks he's too good for this place already. $5, says he quits before Friday." Jason Pitts chimed in from the prep station, leaning back lazily. At 22, he was the youngest shift lead, more for his willingness to laugh at Chad's jokes than any proven skill. None of them noticed how Elijah's head tilted ever so slightly toward the sound of their voices. His eyes reflected the sterile lights above as he quietly organized the cleaning supplies in absolute silence, like a man invisible by design. Over the next 2 weeks, Elijah became the quiet backbone of Branch 72. He arrived 15 minutes early every day. He left only after every surface gleamed under his touch. He scrubbed corners caked in dust no one had touched in months. He carried dripping garbage bags that left dark trails on his pants, without a word of complaint. He polished the kitchen sinks until they reflected the ceiling tiles and revealed water stains that had gone unnoticed for years. While others disappeared into the break room, scrolling their phones and bad-mouthing customers, Elijah worked consistently, quietly, and during the mad lunchtime rushes, when the line snaked around the counter, he stepped in without being asked. No hesitation, no confusion, just clean, efficient movement that made others pause in disbelief. He remembered orders after hearing them once, smiled gently without forced cheer, and left an impression no one could quite name, but no one could forget. "Brooks," Chad bellowed one hectic Wednesday, toilets backed up again. Some kid tried to flush a toy car. Darren and Melody exchanged knowing glances. The bathroom plunger had its own legend, its handle soaked with years of foul mysteries no one dared name. Elijah didn't flinch. He simply nodded, grabbed the maintenance kit, and walked to the restroom like he was heading to refill the napkin dispenser. Patient. Didn't even sigh, Chad muttered, shaking his head. That guy's either desperate or brain dead. In the break room, more a claustrophobic box than a place of rest, Chad ruled his court. He sat at the only good table, surrounded by his loyal few, while the rest huddled near the walls or sat on rickety chairs like forgotten extras. Elijah usually stood, back against the wall, eating his modest peanut butter sandwich and apple in silence. "Look at Mr. Perfect," Darren said loudly, clearly intending for Elijah to hear. "Never complains, never talks back. Freaking creepy, man." "Bet he's faking it," Melody added, her voice razor sharp. "No one's that patient unless they're hiding something." Elijah's gaze slowly lifted to meet hers. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hurt. It was something deeper, an assessment, unflinching, measured. She looked away first. That moment didn't go unnoticed. Maria Vasquez, the quiet cashier who had worked at Branch 72 for 3 years, shifted her chair ever so slightly closer to Elijah. A small gesture, but in a room ruled by fear and hierarchy, it meant the world. At 52, Maria had seen more than most. With twin daughters in college and a husband battling cancer, her eyes recognized things others missed. And in Elijah, she saw something rare. Not just restraint, but quiet power. When she saw how he endured the ridicule, how he didn't bite back but simply absorbed, something inside her stirred. Not pity, but solidarity. "They're always like this to the new ones," she whispered gently in Spanish, her voice carrying generations of fatigue and resilience. Elijah, still holding half of his apple, turned and replied, also in Spanish, soft and direct. "Is that so?" Maria paused, momentarily caught off guard. Very few people at Branch 72 knew she spoke Spanish. Fewer still ever bothered to learn it. Her eyes widened slightly with surprise, then softened into a bittersweet smile. "Not exactly," she said quietly, "but eventually we get through it." What Maria, and no one else at Branch 72 knew, was that Elijah Brooks was not just a dishwasher looking for steady work. He was the centerpiece of a covert internal program codenamed Floor Level, initiated personally by Wallace Delier's founder and CEO, Owen Mather. In recent years, Owen had begun to notice a troubling trend: complaints about toxic leadership, unprofessional conduct, and the abrupt departure of capable employees were steadily increasing across his branches. Corporate inspections, though regular, rarely unearthed the truth. Managers miraculously cleaned up their act when headquarters came knocking. Stores were temporarily spotless, and under pressure employees forced smiles that masked silent fear. Owen knew something had to change, and Elijah was the change. Armed with a PhD in organizational psychology from Northwestern University, 3 published books on corporate culture, and a history of consulting for Fortune 500 companies, Elijah was Owen's most trusted operative to infiltrate what cameras couldn't catch: the unscripted truth hidden behind transactional smiles. That first morning, when Chad Riker dismissed Elijah's outstretched hand and directed him to the mop closet without even pretending civility, Chad had unknowingly signed the death warrant of his own career. Elijah wasn't looking to restart his life. He was here to observe, record, and ultimately dismantle a system corroded from the inside out. Every night, back in his modest one-bedroom apartment, Elijah would transfer handwritten notes to an encrypted file on his laptop. The report, now spanning 47 pages, had become a raw, unflinching account of the toxic culture inside Branch 72. Every face, every comment laced with bias, every pattern of abuse was documented with chilling precision. Occasionally, Elijah would glance at the framed photo beside his laptop, a group shot from a company leadership retreat 3 years prior. In the photo, he stood beside Owen, both of them smiling under a setting sun. Back then, Elijah had a beard and a very different presence. He had stripped that all away, his look, his ego, even his voice, to step into the role of the invisible worker. Just 2 more weeks, he thought one night as he shut the laptop. Then the real work begins. By week 4, Elijah had nearly completed a mental map of Branch 72's hidden hierarchy, where company policies were nothing more than napkin fodder, replaced by the unwritten laws of Chad Riker. One muggy Tuesday morning, Elijah stood near the prep station and noted the familiar pattern. Melody strolled in 17 minutes late. It was her second time that week. Chad pretended to check inventory, not once looking up. Traffic was brutal, Melody announced, tossing her purse under the counter. 10 minutes later, Frank Pearson, 63 years old, a former factory worker forced back into labor after his pension vanished in a corporate bankruptcy, clocked in 2 minutes late. This time, Chad materialized like a storm. "That's twice this month, Frank," he barked loudly enough for the front of house to hear. "You're late one more time and I'll have to write you up. Plenty of people out there would kill for your job." Frank muttered an apology, shame burning his weathered cheeks. He wasn't humiliated because of the volume of the reprimand, but because he knew, deep down, that he had no choice but to endure it. Elijah observed everything, unblinking. This wasn't random injustice. It was calculated dominance, a deliberate system designed to protect the favored few at the cost of everyone else's dignity. If you were part of Chad's inner circle, an odd mixture of good looks, sycophancy, and deliberate mediocrity, you were untouchable. You could spend 20 minutes hiding in the bathroom on TikTok, and no one would say a word. But if you were outside that bubble, like Maria at the register, Frank delivering an aching silence, Sarah barely a month in and still trembling under pressure, or Elijah himself, you carried the weight of everyone else's neglect. That afternoon, during the lull between rushes, Chad called out suddenly, "The fridge temp logs haven't been updated." His eyes bore straight into Sarah, even though everyone knew the task belonged to Darren. "Somebody better take care of it before corporate fires us all." Sarah jolted. The stress-induced twitch at her left eye spasmed again. She scrambled to grab the logbook, then quietly wrote down fabricated temperatures just as she'd been coached. Fake it, if Chat's not watching. Elijah logged it all, the glint in his eyes as cold as glass. Team meetings at Branch 72 were less about strategy and more like scripted humiliation ceremonies, masked as professional development. Chad always started the same way, by targeting the same people. "Who left the walk-in fridge door open last night?" he snapped in one especially tense meeting. Everyone knew it was Jason, but Chad's glare zeroed in on Sarah, who visibly wilted under the attention. $60 worth of product wasted. Maybe we should start deducting from paychecks, huh? Once, Maria cautiously suggested a better system to handle the lunch rush. Chad cut her off mid-sentence with a smirk. "If I wanted advice from the C team, I'd ask for it. Less talking, more working. This isn't a democracy." On the break room wall, a group photo hung crookedly. A corporate visit snapshot from 6 months ago. Everyone's smiling. Chad had his arm around Frank like they were old friends. Melody stood beside Maria like she actually cared. It was a perfect metaphor. A staged reality, wiped away the moment headquarters left the parking lot. What disturbed Elijah most wasn't the favoritism or even the cruelty. It was how naturally the system sustained itself. New hires learned fast. Speak up, and you're out. Defend someone else, and you become the next target. The only safe options were stay invisible, become complicit, or become cruel. On the 23rd night, Elijah typed another line into his confidential file. Subject C continues to exhibit classic workplace bullying behaviors, creating in-group/out-group dynamics that sustain targeted harassment. Subject S now demonstrates maladaptive coping patterns, falsifying records, accepting blame for others. Recommend early intervention before psychological harm becomes permanent. But Elijah wasn't the only one watching. What he didn't know was that Owen Mathers had already authorized a deeper level of oversight. During a maintenance call 2 weeks before Elijah's arrival, hidden cameras were installed throughout Branch 72, in the kitchen, break room, and even near the fridge. Every night, the footage was uploaded to a secure server and reviewed in a closed-door room accessible to only 3 corporate leaders. There, Owen and his legal team watched the unraveling of a workplace culture more toxic than even he had feared. In the first week, Owen had pinched the bridge of his nose watching Chad manipulate expiration labels on turkey packs. "This is worse than I expected," he muttered. "This isn't just bad leadership," his VP replied. "This is a health risk. The legal team says we need a concrete behavioral trigger, something undeniable, or we risk wrongful termination lawsuits." Owen sighed. "Keep watching. Document everything. When we clean house, I don't want a single loophole left open." They didn't know then, but the trigger was coming, faster than they imagined. While Elijah kept writing, while the cameras kept rolling, while the culture rotted quietly, something else was happening too. Darren noticed how customers responded to Elijah's calm and skill. Melody overheard Chad for the first time praise Elijah's deep cleaning behind the drink machine. Jason caught 2 regulars requesting the new guy by name. And in the warped world of Branch 72, positive attention was a threat, a challenge to the pecking order. "Something's got to be done about the new guy," Darren muttered to Chad, nodding toward Elijah, who was quietly restocking napkins with his usual precision. Chad's lips curled into a smile, dark, calculating. "Don't worry," he said coldly. "I've got something special planned for our Mr. Perfect." Because Saturday wasn't just any day, it was storm day. And in Branch 72, during the lunch rush, the real chaos began. And so would the fall. Maria was holding down Register 1 on her own. Register 2 had been conveniently labeled out of order by Melody, a technical issue that, mysteriously, always resolved itself whenever corporate made a visit. Behind the sandwich station, Sarah's hands trembled as sweat beaded on her forehead beneath the suffocating heat lamps. And where was management? Chad, Darren, and Jason were huddled near the back prep station, glued to their phones, laughing like kids on recess. Darren showed Chad a video that made them both double over with laughter. Jason kept checking the clock, counting down the minutes until his shift ended, with no intention of helping clean up the chaos afterward. In the middle of the growing storm, Elijah moved like a calm stream through a hurricane. He flowed between stations, refilling supplies before they ran out, wiping down counters in the precious seconds between orders. When he saw Sarah faltering, he stepped in without being asked, working silently, offering quiet words of encouragement. Frank returned from the delivery, his face pinched from the pain of flaring arthritis. Elijah didn't wait for anyone to speak. He simply picked up the next 3 delivery bags and headed out. No one had to carry more when Elijah was there. "Look at Mr. Employee of the Month," Darren muttered, glaring at Elijah with growing resentment. Chad's face darkened. Store performance was tanking. Customer complaints were rising. That morning, an email from headquarters confirmed the brutal reality. Branch 72 was ranked 68th out of 72 nationwide. But in Chad's mind, the problem wasn't his favoritism, or the understaffing during rush hours, or the corner cutting on food safety. No, the problem was people like Elijah, quiet, competent workers who made his own failures impossible to ignore. "You know what would be funny," Chad murmured, eyes following Elijah as he mopped up a puddle of spilled soda near the pickup counter. "If someone took the trash out today, differently." Darren got it instantly. A feral grin spread across his face. The challenge lit up that same primitive instinct that once made him shove smaller kids into lockers in high school. He grabbed a half-full trash bag, stuffed with old sandwich wrappers, dirty napkins, and foul-smelling mop water, and casually walked toward Elijah. 3 cameras recorded what happened next. The hidden one disguised as a smoke detector, the standard security camera near the fridge, and Melody's iPhone, raised and already recording, eager to share the prank on the staff's private group chat. "Hey, new guy," Darren called. "Got something special for you." Elijah barely had time to turn when the garbage bag was dumped over his head. Soggy wrappers, limp lettuce, napkins soaked in floor cleaner poured down onto his shoulders. Mustard smeared his glasses. Mayonnaise splattered across his collar. A pickle slice clung to his shoulder. Coffee grounds matted his hair. The room exploded in 2 reactions. From Chad's inner circle, unrestrained laughter. Chad doubled over, Jason high-fived Darren, and Melody zoomed in with her camera, snickering. That's what teachers' pets get at Branch 72. From everyone else, dead silence. Maria covered her mouth in horror, eyes wide. Frank took an instinctive step forward, then froze. Years of learned helplessness pinning him in place. Sarah kept her head down, pretending to roll a sandwich, too terrified to even look. The customers stopped talking. A woman gathered her 2 children and left, food untouched. A teenager in a Letterman jacket lowered his phone slowly, his face a mix of disgust and confusion. Elijah stood perfectly still. Garbage dripped from his shoulders to his shoes. His face held no anger, no shame, just a stillness. A hollow calm. Then, without a word, he turned, walked to the supply closet, retrieved a clean towel, and began wiping himself off. He adjusted his glasses, cleaned the mess Darren had made, and returned to work as if nothing had happened. "What a loser," Chad barked, slapping Darren on the back. "Didn't even try to fight back." He turned toward the stunned customers. "Show's over, folks. Just a little team-building fun." A few customers backed away from the line. A man in a suit placed his untouched sandwich on the counter and walked out. 2 college students exchanged a glance, reluctantly accepting their orders. "Send me that video," Chad told Melody. "That one's going in my personal Hall of Fame." The sneering laughter was still echoing when the electronic door chime rang. A tall man stepped inside, refined, commanding. His tailored gray suit fit perfectly, his silver hair was neatly combed, and his gaze cut through the room like a blade. No one recognized him, but they were about to, and Branch 72 would never be the same again. He stood tall, posture rigid like a retired officer, even though his tanned skin and silver hair suggested he was well into his 50s. 2 sharply dressed women followed him, steps crisp and intentional. Like a single nod from him could shift the direction of the entire room. A 3rd man trailed behind, someone Chad vaguely recognized from regional operations. Chad's smirk vanished. There was something about this man, the way his eyes surveyed the space with precise intensity, the way the regional director walked behind him instead of leading, that sent a shiver slicing down Chad's spine. The restaurant fell completely silent. The man's eyes landed on Elijah, still pulling bits of lettuce from his hair, still calmly assisting a customer. "I believe," the man said, voice clear and firm, "we have a situation to address." He didn't wait for acknowledgement. He didn't join the line, didn't ask for service. He walked with purpose, straight past the registers, through the employees-only door and into the back area, where Chad and his circle stood frozen in disbelief. "Excuse me, sir," Chad began, voice suddenly syrupy, slipping into what employees called his health inspector mode. Polite on the surface, annoyed underneath. "This area's for staff only. I'll have to ask." The man raised his hand. That was all it took. The two women and the regional director stepped in behind him, forming a silent wall of corporate power that shrank the room down to a tense, airless box. "Your employee needs assistance," the man said, nodding toward Elijah. His voice held the quiet authority of someone who never repeated themselves. Chad forced a laugh. "It was just a harmless team prank. "Are you all right, Dr. Brooks?" the man interrupted, turning directly to Elijah. The word doctor dropped like thunder on a clear sky. Chad's crew fell silent. Darren furrowed his brow. Jason's mouth hung open. Melody, still holding her phone, let it fall to the floor with a loud clack. Elijah straightened, pulling one last pickle slice from his pocket. He nodded. "I'm fine, Mr. Mathers." The name hit Chad like a slap. Mathers. Owen Mathers. The founder and CEO of the entire well-tasked DeLei franchise. The name printed on every paycheck. The face framed above the break room microwave. Owen turned to the room. His voice cut like glass. "I'm Owen Mathers, founder and CEO of Well-Taste DeLei. This is Angela Rivera, our head of human resources. Diane Patel, our chief legal counsel. And I believe you've all seen Michael Torres, your regional operations director." The room didn't breathe. Even the kitchen timers fell silent. Owen continued, calm but burning with restrained fury. "For the past month, Dr. Elijah Brooks has been evaluating this branch as part of a company-wide workplace culture initiative." Chad's eyes bounced from Owen to Elijah, scrambling to process the impossible. The dishwasher, the guy who cleaned toilets? Owen didn't blank. "Dr. Brooks holds a PhD in organizational psychology from Northwestern. He's a nationally recognized expert in ethical workplace culture. His latest book is required reading at Cornell's School of Hospitality Management." Melody's phone buzzed on the floor. Jason looked like he might throw up. Darren stared at the floor like it might offer escape. "But we didn't rely solely on Dr. Brooks's notes," Owen said, pointing first at a vent near the ceiling, then at a smoke detector by the break room. "We've also had camera surveillance active throughout this location due to elevated complaints, sanitation concerns, and high staff turnover." He tapped a sleek tablet. With just a few gestures, he brought up high-resolution footage, multiple angles of Darren dumping trash on Elijah. The laughter, the high fives, Melody's phone recording, every frame crisp and damning. He turned the screen toward Chad and his team. "Would anyone like to explain this?" Owen turned the screen toward Chad's group. "Would anyone care to explain this?" His voice carried the weight of a command, not a question. Chad swallowed hard. "Sir, it was just a harmless bit of fun." "You call that fun?" Owen cut him off, his tone sharp as a blade. "Assaulting a coworker? Creating a hostile work environment? Violating food safety protocols? Publicly humiliating an employee in front of customers? Is that your idea of appropriate management, Mr. Riker?" No one spoke. Owen turned to Elijah. "Dr. Brooks, in your professional opinion, does this incident reflect the overall culture of this location?" Elijah placed the towel aside. His voice was no longer restrained. It was now the voice of an expert, measured, firm, and precise. No longer hiding, no longer playing small. "This incident," Elijah said, his eyes sweeping across the room, "is simply the most visible symptom of a deeply rooted cultural dysfunction at Branch 72. I've documented recurring patterns of favoritism, targeted harassment, falsification of safety records, chronic understaffing during peak hours, all stemming from leadership failure and a social structure that rewards unethical behavior over competence and customer service. As he spoke, it was as if a light had broken through the gloom. Maria lifted her head, the weight on her shoulders visibly easing. Frank nodded gently. Sarah clenched her hands in front of her chest, like someone reclaiming a lost part of herself. For the first time in what felt like years, those who had been marginalized heard their truth spoken aloud and acknowledged. Chad opened his mouth, perhaps to object, but no words came out. Owen gave a nod to Michael Torres, who stepped forward and placed a laptop on the prep counter. The screen displayed a live feed from the store's surveillance system. Views of the dining area, kitchen, prep stations, and even the parking lot. Nothing was hidden. For the past month, Owen said, now addressing the entire staff, not just Chad's inner circle, we've been monitoring this branch 24/7, and what we've seen is unacceptable. He turned to Torres. Show them. As the footage began to play, something remarkable happened. By the time the last clip ended, the tiny kitchen at Branch 72 felt frozen in a heavy, suffocating silence. No blender whirring, no kitchen timers beeping, only the hush of stunned breaths. And then, without a single word spoken, the staff instinctively divided into two distinct groups. On one side stood Chad, Melody, and Jason, the self-proclaimed rulers of the branch who once thrived on manipulation, mockery, and intimidation. Now their faces were pale, their expressions hollow. The kingdom they built on fear and deceit was crumbling before their eyes. And this time, there was no scapegoat left. On the other side stood Maria, Frank, Sarah, and the rest, the ones who had endured quietly, day after day, without protection. Their faces were a mosaic of disbelief, relief, and the fragile flicker of something they hadn't felt in a long time. And in the center stood Elijah Brooks, still stained with garbage, yet somehow the most dignified person in the room. Porus typed in commands as the laptop came alive with a carefully organized set of surveillance clips, each time-stamped, annotated, and cross-referenced with staff schedules. This wasn't a hasty reaction. It was a meticulously planned operation, executed with surgical precision. Let's begin with food safety violations, Torres said in a voice coldly clinical. The next video showed Chad altering expiration dates on deli meat packages. Darren dropped a sandwich on the floor and placed it back on the tray. Melody applied makeup while handling unwrapped food items. Move on to customer mistreatment, Owen instructed. Footage rolled of Chad rolling his eyes behind an elderly customer struggling to read the menu. Jason deliberately shorting a teenage boy's sandwich while joking about diet portions. Darren making crude comments toward female customers, prompting visible discomfort from nearby women. Internal employee harassment, Owen continued. The section was longer. Sarah crying alone in the break room, Frank being assigned trash duty despite his doctor's note limiting heavy lifting, Maria being mocked for speaking Spanish while helping non-English speaking customers. As the footage cycled on, Chad's face turned a deeper shade of gray. Darren, who was always loud, now stared at the floor. Melody kept glancing at the exit, her posture taut, like she might bolt. Jason remained motionless, as if already accepting his fate. And finally, Owen said, his voice now tight with restrained fury, deliberate manipulation of corporate evaluation metrics. The final clip showed Chad coaching staff before inspection days, fabricating temperature logs, hiding expired goods in locked cabinets. The clip ended with Chad laughing alongside Darren. Fooled those corporate suits again. There was nothing left to say. Every person in the store, employees and customers alike, had just witnessed the truth. Mr. Mathers, Chad's voice cracked as he finally spoke. I can explain. No need, Owen said flatly, raising a hand. I've been in this industry for 37 years, Mr. Riker. I've heard every excuse, every lie, every half-hearted apology. I'm not interested. He turned to the remaining staff, meeting each gaze with unflinching clarity. Well-Taste Elise started in my parents' kitchen. My father was a butcher who believed quality came from care, not just care for the product, but care for the people and for the customer. He used to say, a sandwich isn't just a meal. It's a promise that someone cared enough to make something good for someone else. Owen looked around at the space, the same one that had once been ruled by fear. Branch 72 broke that promise, not because of poor training, not because of tough market conditions, but because leadership here decided that respect for standards, for customers, and for coworkers was optional. He turned to Angela Rivera, who stepped forward with a black leather portfolio. Now for the part I want to say myself. No emails, no memos. He pointed directly at Chad. Chad Riker, your employment with Well-Taste Elise is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Chad stammered. You can't. I can. And I just did. Owen replied without pause. Darren Wilson, Melody Carson, Jason Pitts. You are also terminated, effective immediately. Final checks will be processed per state law and sent to the addresses on file. He gestured to Rivera. You will surrender your store keys and system access codes to Ms. Rivera before leaving the premises. Darren's face turned crimson. This is a joke. Choose your next words very carefully, Mr. Wilson, interjected Diane Patel, her voice steel. You are already facing potential civil liability for assault and for creating a hostile work environment. Criminal charges remain on the table. Melody broke down. I was just going along with it. I didn't mean to. You filmed an assault on a coworker and shared it for entertainment, Rivera said, her tone cutting and dry. Your participation is fully documented. Jason said nothing. Perhaps he was the only one who understood how pointless any protest would be. Owen turned to Torres. Michael, please escort them to collect their personal belongings. They have 10 minutes. Anyone remaining after that will be considered trespassing. As Torres led the shell-shocked former employees away from the space they had once ruled, Owen turned back to the team that remained. His voice softened, not in authority but in compassion. To those of you who have endured, who kept your heads down, who were overlooked, I owe you an apology. A personal one. This is not what Well-Taste stands for, Owen Mathers said, his voice now calm but resonant, echoing in the kitchen that had fallen still. This is not who we are. This is not the company I built. He paused, locking eyes with each of them. Maria, her eyes misted with emotion. Frank, trembling from the weight of the moment. Sarah, hands clenched at her chest like someone holding on to hope. These weren't just employees anymore. They were survivors finally being seen. Branch 72 will be closed for 1 week, effective immediately, Owen announced. During that time, you will continue to receive full pay while we restructure operations and install a new leadership team. A wave of disbelief rippled through the room. A paid week off in the food service industry? What once felt impossible was now, somehow, reality. Via Rivera, he continued, will be conducting individual interviews with each of you. Your insights, those of people who lived and endured this environment, will guide us in making sure this never happens again. Then he stepped out into the dining area, where many customers still sat in stunned silence after witnessing everything unfold. To our guests who experienced what happened today, he said sincerely, I offer you my deepest apologies. Your meals today are on the house, and please accept these gift cards for a complimentary meal at any Well-Taste Elise location. A few employees instinctively stepped forward to resume service, but Owen gently raised a hand and shook his head. Branch 72 is officially closed starting now. Please hang a "closed for renovations" sign on the door. As the staff began shutdown procedures, Elijah, still in his stained uniform, walked over to Maria, who stood quietly, still trying to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. "You okay?" he asked gently. "You know," Maria's voice quavered. "It's been 4 years. Can you believe that? 4 years living in that cycle. And now, it's over." "It's not over," Elijah corrected softly, his tone calm but resolute. "It's just beginning, only this time, the right way." Out in the parking lot, a different conversation was happening between two former kings of Branch 72. "This is your fault," Chad hissed at Darren as they walked briskly to their cars. "Your stupid little prank ruined everything." "What? That was your idea," Darren snapped. "Good luck proving it," Chad spat back, unlocking his car without looking behind him. Neither of them noticed the unmarked van parked quietly in the corner of the lot. The same van from which Owen had watched them for weeks, building the case that had just brought their reign to an end. Back inside, as the remaining staff gathered their things, Frank, now 63 years old and no stranger to hardship, approached Owen with hesitant steps. "Sir," he said quietly, nervously turning his cap in his hands. "What happens to us now?" Owen placed a hand on the older man's shoulder. "Now, Mr. Pearson," he said with quiet conviction, "we rebuild. But this time, we do it right." Exactly 1 month after what had come to be known within Welltest headquarters as Trash Day, Branch 72 reopened its doors. On the surface, the place looked the same. Same counter, same tables, same menu board. But inside, everything was different. A line of customers stretched down the block, drawn by curiosity and renewed belief. What started as a few eyewitness posts on social media had become a national conversation about dignity in the workplace. Several major business outlets picked up the story as a rare but powerful example of what could happen when those in power chose to do what was right. Maria Vasquez adjusted her new name tag, Shift Supervisor. After 4 years of silence and survival, the title still felt like a quiet dream finally realized. Next to her, Frank, now serving as new employee mentor, gently explained sandwich wrapping to a young new hire. His new position came with reduced hours, but the same pay, personally arranged by Owen to accommodate his chronic arthritis. Sarah, once a nervous wreck under Chad's leadership, now led the sandwich line with quiet confidence. The eye twitch that had plagued her for months had vanished completely. Their new branch manager, Diane Chen, moved through the space with composed authority. A 10-year veteran of the company with an exemplary record, she had been personally selected by Owen after a series of in-depth interviews. There were no barked orders, only clear direction and firm encouragement. During rush, she reminded the team, accuracy over speed, a correct order that's 30 seconds late builds more trust than a fast mistake. The staff break room had undergone a transformation as well. New chairs, a proper table, working appliances, and even a modest bookshelf filled with literature on food service and ethical leadership. A framed poster now hung on the wall. People are always watching, even when you think they aren't. Below it, in smaller print, what matters is who you are when you think no one cares. The surveillance cameras remained, but this time they were visible, with tasteful signs that read, "Quality Assurance Monitoring in Progress," because every sandwich and every interaction matters. Branch 72 hadn't just come back, it had sparked a movement. The Protocol 72 initiative had become the new standard across all locations. Quarterly anonymous evaluations were now the norm. Mystery shoppers didn't just rate food, They watched how employees treated one another, and manager bonuses were tied not only to profits, but also to retention and team satisfaction. 6 months after reopening, Branch 72 boasted the highest customer satisfaction rating in the franchise's history. Turnover had dropped by 84%. Sales were up 32%. A location once considered the company's worst performing had become its gold standard. On a crisp autumn morning, Owen returned, this time not in a tailored suit but in a simple, well-tossed polo shirt. He walked through the doors during a busy lunch rush, greeting employees by name, shaking hands. "Mr. Mathers," Maria called out, genuinely happy. "Just Owen," he replied with a smile. He spent the next hour observing. No chaos, no fear, just smooth, respectful coordination. When a new hire accidentally dropped a tray of cookies, there was no mockery. 3 employees stepped in to help, and one made a joke, light enough to make the red-faced teen laugh despite himself. Before he left, Owen asked to say a few words during the afternoon break. The new staff lounge was warm, welcoming, nothing like the cold, tense break room of the past. "What happened here," Owen said, seated casually on the edge of a table, "was never just about a few bad apples. It was about what happens when we forget to see each other as human, when we start deciding who deserves dignity and who doesn't." He looked around at each face, no longer afraid, but filled with purpose. The trash that was thrown wasn't just garbage. It was a symbol for how we treat people we think don't matter. But here's the truth I want everyone at Valtes to remember. Everyone matters. And character isn't who you are when the boss is watching. It's who you are when you think no one is. The eyes in the room shimmered with quiet pride. A restaurant, a team, reborn. Later that afternoon, Maria handed a carefully wrapped sandwich to a quiet, thoughtful man in wire-rimmed glasses. A regular customer who came in every Wednesday. "Here you go, Dr. Brooks," she said with a soft smile. Elijah accepted it with a nod of thanks. Though he now served as a senior consultant across the franchise, he still visited Branch 72 regularly, not to check in, but to remember, to remind himself why the work mattered. "How's it going?" he asked Maria. She looked around. The bustling dining area, Sarah coaching a new team member, Frank sharing lunch with the new manager, laughter and thank yous filling the air, and for the first time in years, her voice carried not a trace of fear. "It's good, Elijah," she said, her eyes glowing. "Really, really good." And at Branch 72, that wasn't just something you said to avoid a complaint. It was the truth. Subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we believe that the human spirit is never truly defeated, only waiting to rise.